Tensions are escalating with Russia after the U.S. military released video of Tuesday's attack on an American drone. The footage shows a Russian fighter jet colliding with the unmanned aircraft, causing it to crash into the Black Sea. Now, this video comes as we learned this morning that Chinese President Xi Jinping plans to visit Russia next week to meet with Vladimir Putin. So Weijia Jiang is at the White House with the latest on all of this morning. Weijia, good morning.
Good morning to you, Anne-Marie, and good morning to everybody. Those two leaders will be meeting for the first time in 6 months, and it comes after Xi Jinping secured his historic third term as president. This trip to Moscow also sends a strong message to Washington as tensions between both countries and the U.S. remain high. Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin last met in September 2022. Now, just over a year into Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the two world leaders are planning to meet again Monday. Both countries made the announcement Friday, with the Kremlin releasing a statement saying the two leaders will discuss the development of a partnership and will also sign important bilateral documents. This comes on the heels of a report by Politico that Chinese companies have been sending assault rifles, body armor, and drone parts to Russian entities. The shipments took place between June and December of 2022, according to customs data, unconfirmed by CBS News. On the Takeout podcast, White House spokesman John Kirby told Major Garrett Thursday China should think twice before providing lethal weapons to Russia.
We don't believe that it's in China's best interest to be on that side of the war in that way, to help Mr. Putin slaughter innocent Ukrainians. We don't believe it's in China's best interest, but obviously that they'll have a choice to make.
Just days ago, a Russian fighter jet collided with an unarmed American drone, forcing it to crash into the Black Sea. Video released by U.S. officials Thursday shows the Russians making two passes from behind the drone, dousing it in a cloudy stream of jet fuel before clipping it.
To demonstrate publicly what type of actions the Russians had taken, we felt that it was important to provide this imagery.
CBS News has learned that those Russian pilots were acting on orders from military leaders. And in another development this morning, Slovakia announced that it will join Poland in sending fighter jets to Ukraine. Of course, the president there, Zelensky, has been asking for those from NATO countries for quite some time now. But the White House says it does not change the U.S. assessment that fighter jets are not needed at this point in the conflict, and the U.S. has no plans to join Slovakia and Poland in sending fighter jets as well.
Yeah,
Anne-Marie?
No doubt it's going to change the nature of the war, as has happened every time new equipment enters the battlefield. Of course, there's a sensitivity when things like this happen, with the fighter jet and the drone. You don't want to escalate. It's a very sensitive area. We're hearing from, some members of the GOP saying, listen, this is how the U.S. should respond. They should send even more drones. Do we know anything more about how the Biden administration plans to respond moving forward to this incident?
Well, after the drone incident, we know that Secretary of Defense Austin called his counterpart in Russia to de-escalate for that very reason, Anne-Marie. And so he said that they didn't want to risk any kind of misstep, right, because tensions are already so high, because Russia said they viewed the drone just being there as a provocation. So any small move that could be interpreted the wrong way could have devastating impacts. And so right now the administration says those conversations are crucial to make sure they don't escalate, right? And so that is exactly why we're seeing John Kirby saying in that interview with Major Garrett of the podcast that, it would totally be a game changer if China were to provide those lethal weapons to Russia.
In fact, I want to just play some of what John Kirby had to say. He's the national security spokesperson.
What's not clear in the video is whether the pilot intended to strike the drone or just it was poor flying. Either way, doesn't matter. Completely inappropriate, unsafe, and unprofessional.
Is it an act of war?
I don't think I would call it an act of war, no. I mean, it was unsafe, it was unprofessional. But look, nobody wants to see this war escalate between the United States and Russia, to make it become a war between the United States and Russia.
I think, Weijia, the concern is always that something will happen by accident. That when you have, all this military hardware flying around or on the ground, that there will be an error that will eventually lead to devastating consequences. But as John Kirby said, no one wants to see a war. No one wants to see the U.S. be drawn into this war. And I imagine that's part of the reason why the administration is saying no to these fighter jets.
Absolutely. Just last month, Russia actually said to Britain, that was considering sending fighter jets, that if you were to do that, it would have serious political ramifications, not only for Europe, but for the entire world. So that was a warning. And I did try to ask the White House press secretary yesterday about how the president views this decision by NATO allies to send fighter jets. Does he believe there could be other consequences, unintended consequences? And she repeatedly said that, this was Poland's sovereign decision and that the U.S. would not interfere with that. That's fine. But the fact is that once these fighter jets get into Ukraine's hand, that is viewed very differently by Russia.
Right.
And so it is, adding to an already serious situation there.
Yeah, you're right on point, Weijia. With each ask from Ukraine, whether it's additional military aid, there's been resistance, and then eventually, relenting. But when you add, whether it's battle tanks or fighter jets or whatever you add, you're changing the nature of the war, and it's anyone's guess where it will go from there. Weijia, thank you very much.
You're welcome.